were at the signing of this act. What does it mean as motivation in shaping the policy of the Trump administration?
Yeah, so a year ago, I was in the room when President Trump stood by Laken Riley's mother and comforted her and then signed the Laken Riley Act into law. It was the first piece of legislation he signed as he started his second term as president. And it was a promise they'd made on the campaign trail not to forget the women who have been murdered by illegal aliens who are in the country illegally. And I keep hearing you talking about we can't just round up everybody, but let's not forget how Laken Riley's killer got to Georgia. He was paroled into the United States by the Biden administration after crossing the border illegally from Venezuela. He then took a taxpayer-funded trip to New York City, where he was given a taxpayer-funded hotel room. Then he took a taxpayer-funded flight to Georgia, where he was living and working near the university. And then he attacked Laken Riley and murdered her brutally. Her head was smashed in with a rock by this man while she fought off his advances for 17 minutes. I advise everyone to listen to the 911 call before she was killed by this person. So you can argue, well, there's all these people in the country who don't have a criminal record. It's like the broken windows theory of policing. You have to police it at the lowest level to avoid it escalating to a situation like this. And she is not the only one this has happened to. This has happened thousands of times throughout the country to American citizens who are supposed to be able to live in an environment where their government protects them from criminals, not enables them and gives them taxpayer-funded transportation into their communities.
Two separate issues. And what one is the suffrage that is given to people, because the idea of what you provide them is a funding and a policy argument. The idea of how you eliminate the threat that you're really worried about, which isn't just the tax money, that matters, but it's lives, right? And I think that you're making the case, Katie, for why you shouldn't be trying to just round up all of them, because broken windows doesn't apply to a misdemeanor illegal entrance. Broken windows applies to people who start with low-level crimes and move up. I think it's apples and oranges, but it doesn't matter. Isn't your case go after the bad guys? Go after the bad guys, because that's what we want to avoid. Put your energy there.
He was.
Yeah,
he was a bad guy.
No question. Should have never been here. Should have never been here.
Exactly. So would you say that there shouldn't be any kind of prosecution or pursuit of those who cross the border illegally, which is a crime in this country? You're enabling criminals who have no respect for the law to come into the country and then to go around and decide that they're going to, because they disobeyed the law before, take advantage of the fact that they're not being prosecuted and engage in this type of criminal activity, and people have been murdered as a result of it. I mean, these are all preventable. Every single one of these is preventable. The president has shut the border down. A year and a half ago, the cartels were making more money trafficking human beings, which means taking advantage of women, selling them into the sex trade, than they were making money on trafficking drugs into this country. The reason we have all of this crime throughout the country, especially in Chicago, where El Chapo's son, just in December, was finally convicted in Chicago, not in Mexico, in Chicago, for his crimes, is because the cartels are running the streets, or used to be running the streets, in America. The murder rate went down 20% last year, the lowest since 1900, because we're deporting criminal aliens who are running the streets of America. And nobody wants to admit that that's the problem.
That's where you lose
well, look into it.
One, you want to go after them. Well, listen, I promise you, it's not about my understanding of the facts. It's about how they apply. If you want to go after Mexican cartels, that's fine. If you want to celebrate crime going down, fine. It's a 5-year trend. And the report that you guys are leaning on does not mention FBI deportation arrests. What they mention is local policing and local community efforts that has created this 5-year trend. And I'm all for it. And I'm all for the policing that you're asking for. I think it should be more that way. I thought the Laken Riley Act was incomplete. What do you mean that you get to hold somebody who's charged with a crime like this who's not here legally? Why don't they get thrown out? I thought the law didn't go far enough, frankly, because the majority of this country is very clear. Guys like this Venezuelan scumbag who shouldn't have been in the country and did this, everybody wants them gone. And the people who don't want them gone are not going to win elections. So I think it's about how you focus on these bad guys as opposed to casting such a wide net and saying everyone who's here illegally is a bad guy. I don't think that's true, and I don't think coming illegally makes you want to commit worse crimes. I don't think that's a thing.
Okay, well, there's plenty of data to show that illegal aliens commit higher crimes or are incarcerated at rates 5 times that of the regular American citizen. But you have data that you put up
only
earlier
for the
in the show
entrance.
that disputes that.
Only for the entrance.
No, not for entrance. Also
not for serious
violent crimes.
Look at the Cato Clinic.
Also for serious crimes, Chris. And to your point, so on one hand, you're saying that we're casting too wide of a net. On the other hand, you're saying the Laken Riley Act doesn't go far enough because it allows the federal government to hold illegal criminal aliens who have committed crimes like assault or shoplifting, DUI, in order to potentially deport them out of the country. So when ICE now is carrying out the mission of that act, of the law, and they're casting a wide net, then there's all this outcry that they're going too far. So which one is it? They're going too far? They're not going far enough?
Well, first of all, it's both, right? Because it depends who you're talking about, Katie. It's not a semantic issue. It's a policy concentration issue, right? So my problem with the law was,
the Laken Riley Act
why hold them?
That.
Yeah, the Laken Riley Act.
Would you prefer that they had no due process?
They're not even supposed to be here. But the due process works two different ways.
People like the Maryland man who was a human trafficker. They tried to deport him, and you have Democrats flying to El Salvador to get him back. So that doesn't work out.
And I think that was a terrible look politically. I think they paid the price for it, and I don't know that they learned the lesson yet, but that was a really bad look. I'm with you on that.
Based on Minnesota, they have not learned. They have not learned the lesson at all. In fact, they are defending.
Well, but see, Minnesota is different.
People who you think have committed no crime. They're defending the most violent criminals. That's what ICE's mission is. I keep hearing all about ICE isn't trained.
But that's not who they're rounding up.
You're right. They don't. Yes, that's exactly who they're rounding up. Do you see the photos?
No,
with
they're not. Look at the graph.
The
ratio.
The graph.
Yeah, they're getting bad guys, but the ratio
is like
50%.
Releasing.
Yeah, they're getting some bad guys.
The ratio.
Getting some bad guys.
Okay, so
the ratio is not good.
That's exactly what their mission is.
And I think that how you round them up matters.
What do you mean their ratio is not good? You think? What do you mean their ratio is not good? So do you expect?
Look at the graph. The red is no charges or convictions. The blue is who you said you're going after.
Okay, so this is the way this works, because it's a sanctuary state and a sanctuary city that they're working in. They are not just going into jails where they are looking for those who have charges or convictions and transferring them peacefully and not in public. They are going into places where they happen to find other people who are in the country illegally, and they are not allowed to ignore the law and allow people who are not here illegally, as Tom Homan talked about today, to just go free. They have an obligation to arrest everybody. So if you want fewer arrested people who haven't been convicted of a crime yet, like the guy who hadn't been convicted of a crime before he murdered in cold blood, Laken Riley, then you can make that argument. But then you can say they absolutely have to transfer all these criminals inside of prisons, so ICE isn't out, as you would say, catching all these other people who have committed the crime of coming into the country illegally, which is what people voted for. And the majority of the country, in terms of polling, shows that most people want deportations of everyone who's here illegally, not just who you would deem someone who is qualified for deportation based on the heinous crime they've already committed, instead of doing it before they commit those crimes.
But again, you're making this assumption that if you came into the country illegally, you're going to commit worse crimes. I don't think the data shows that. I don't think our experience shows that. But it doesn't really matter. The majority of the country is absolutely invested in getting people that present a danger to us who aren't here legally out. So they have the mandate. It's about how they do that job, and we'll see how it goes going forward. And you and I can talk about it every night if you want.
Okay, well, I would love to talk to you about it again, but I would make the case that when people come into the country illegally and the first thing they do is break our laws, it's fair to assume that they are dangerous and willing to continue to break laws. And I think it does matter. I think Laken Riley's life mattered. I think Rachel Morin's life mattered. I think that the long list of women who have been murdered.
I don't have to be evil.
You just said it doesn't matter.
I don't have to be evil or, no. I don't believe I have to be evil or immoral to see a distinction between someone who commits a misdemeanor by making a desperate decision to come across this border illegally and a murderer. I don't think they're the same people. They don't have to be the same people. That's my point. I'm not saying the people who did this aren't
Okay,
bad.
well,
Obviously, they're bad.
I would rather prevent people from coming into the country illegally and risking the chance that that could happen when
me
it's
too.
completely preventable. And we know this because the president has shut the border down, and President Biden let in millions of military-aged males from countries that are failed states to prey on young women in our communities. And I'm not okay with that. It's a shame that you are.
No, I'm not okay with it either. That's why Biden, a big reason other than how they handled the transition from him
But you want to let them in. Do you think that they shouldn't be taken out?
No, I don't want to let them in. I don't want to let them in. I do think that they should be taken out.
Well,
that's why
the
administration has that registration program. But look, I think getting them out, the idea that you're going to do it this way isn't going to happen. So
Which way do you prefer?
I think that there are other strategies.
Which way do you think they should go?
I think that
they're self-deporting. They're paying people to leave.
Strategies. I think you have layered strategies. First of all, you're right. They are doing that. They just don't like talking about it. But I think they should talk about it more
talk about it
because
all the time.
I think if more people, no, they don't. In fact,
yes, they
you
do.
find me a clip of the president saying, "I'll pay you and I'll fly you out and I'll give you preference to come back soon," which is our program. They don't talk about that. They talk about bad hombres and getting people because there's a boogeyman effect.
There's like 1 million people who have self-deported over the last year, which is a lot. They talk about it all the time.
A lot of people are because
taxpayers are paying for them to leave.
Because they're scared, and a lot of them weren't bad people in the communities. They were helpful to the communities. Anyway, we'll keep talking about it. I appreciate your arguments. You're always welcome here, and I'll be watching you tonight at 10. Katie Pavlich, tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.